Okay, so the first of those, and Katie, thank you, of course, yes, we need to begin recording again, yeah. I'll just make sure there's nothing new in chat, I don't think. No, that's fine, and there are no hands raised, so we can get into these items now then, yeah. Okay, so lots with Laura. However, we'll turn to Laura in the first place on item 20, and we've been asked to recommend the proposed amendment. Well, it's written for the audit committee, I think, this paper, isn't it, Laura? But that's okay. We're being asked to approve the proposed amendments to the Board of Directors standing orders. So, Laura, what do we need to do to think about this, and what we're being asked to approve?
Yeah, thank you, Max. Yeah, apologies about that typo there. So yeah, the board is being asked to approve the amendments. The standing orders are part of our suite of governing documents, and they set out the framework within which the board conducts its business. And obviously we review them on a regular basis. We've reviewed them and we're proposing some minor changes, nothing material. So we've included reference to the academies as well as committees. To reflect our governance structure. We've reflected the change from the Health and Care Act 2022, removed any references to monitor, as that now comes under NHS England. And we've also confirmed that the timeline for review of the standing orders is every 2 years rather than an annual review. The amendments were reviewed by the Audit Committee on the 12th of September. They agreed to support their approval by the board, but they did just ask that we checked that our standing orders are in line with other organisations. So we have done that check about our local trusts and the WIAT Trust, and it does appear that there's sort of a standard template that these follow. So there aren't any further amendments arising from that check. I think that's everything. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, no, of course, Laura. Yeah. So again, we'll just pause for a moment and see whether anybody has any questions or queries regarding detail of the standing orders amendments. I think obviously some of those are academic in terms of reference to academies, etc., aren't they? So that's kind of the gist of the amendments, I think. But I'll just make sure whether people are comfortable with those. Yeah. Okay. Are we unanimously supporting the amendments? And let's get them in, and we approve of that. Yeah. Okay, Laura, thank you. That's item 20 sorted. So shall we go to a kind of similar item, isn't it? The compliance with Code of Governance for NHS Provider Trusts and amendments to the NHS Provider Licence and Enforcement Guidance. So again, this is more an information matter, but Laura, with you again, please, to just bring to our attention what you think is important here.
Yeah, so we just wanted to bring an update to the board, firstly, around the Code of Governance for NHS Provider Trusts. Following the update that we provided in January, setting out the changes that are being made to the code. We also provided an action plan at that time to address any areas where we were either non-compliant or partially compliant with the new code. And I've attached the updated action plan, Appendix 1 to the paper. So there are just 3 areas now sort of outstanding which need to be addressed, and they're all in progress. So there aren't any issues to escalate to the board in that respect. And we will do our usual annual review of our compliance against the code and report that to the board in May next year.
Yeah.
In terms of the amendments to the provider licence, so this was reviewed. There was a consultation sort of late last year, and the new licence was then published and became effective from the 1st of April. So the main changes to this are arising from the changes brought about by the Health and Care Act and the integration of providers and the establishment of integrated care boards. It also reflects some new conditions relating to our digital obligations around climate change and delivering net zero. It also removes things like the competition condition, which are no longer relevant under the Health and Care Act. And then there were other kind of technical amendments just to make sure the licence remains up to date. This was reviewed by the executive team, and we did agree that it would be useful to assess the trust position against the new licence conditions now, sort of proactively, rather than waiting until the end of the year, as we usually would do, so that we can then set out an action plan for any areas where we need to implement plans to comply with those conditions. So we'll provide an update around that to the board in November. And then finally, the enforcement guidance. Again, this has been reviewed and updated to align with the Health and Care Act and the establishment of ICBs. Obviously, it confirms that ICBs will have oversight of providers, sort of in partnership with NHS England, but ICBs will kind of take the lead on that. And there aren't any kind of particular changes to note for trusts as such. I think that the main change was around ICBs and the introduction of a two-tier approach to enforcement for them. So where there would be sort of undertakings initially, and then if there was more serious concerns, there would then be formal directions from NHS England to the ICB, and that follows the same process for trusts as well. And again, just other minor amendments to reflect the change from monitor to NHS England, and the fact that the licence now applies to NHS trusts as well as foundation trusts. But yeah, I think that was everything I wanted to highlight, Max. So, yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks. Yeah. So, Code of Governance, NHS provider licence and enforcement guidance, and the new licence conditions. Thank you, Laura, for your clear presentation. This is under Matthew as lead director, so I should really just turn to Chris and just see whether, I mean, Laura's very given us a very detailed briefing there, Chris, but is there anything you would want to bring to fellow directors' attention, please?
No, nothing more to add, Max.
No, you're comfortable with the paper and you endorse it and support it. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. Thanks. Colleagues, is there any further detail required? Any queries, amendments, issues, challenges, anything else? No? Okay, great stuff. We're being asked to review and note the assessment of compliance with the Code of Governance for NHS provider trusts. We're being asked to note the plan to undertake a proactive review against the new licence conditions, provide an update, next steps at the November board meeting, and to note the update provided with regard to the amendments to the NHS provider licence and enforcement guidance. Are we all comfortable to do that? Yeah, and Laura, I should just check with you, are those recommendations still correctly, properly and accurately written, as you would want the board to think? Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, that is correct, thank you.
I wasn't going back to the audit committee one there, Laura, I promise you that. Yeah, no, that's great. So we're all unanimous support for those. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, and then moving to the other matter that requires our approval, please. Again, for Laura to present under Matthew as lead director, but this is about the modern slavery and human trafficking statement, and we're being asked if we would adopt that as a trust to review and approve the statement for publication on our website, and indeed to review it on an annual basis. But I will turn to Laura, of course, and just see what she may wish to bring to our attention specifically. So with you again, Laura, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the Modern Slavery Act imposes a requirement on organisations who have a turnover in excess of 36 million a year to publish a written slavery and human trafficking statement. And that is to set out the steps they've taken to ensure that slavery and human trafficking is not taking place, including with its supply chain. So it does actually apply to commercial organisations and not necessarily intended to apply to the NHS. However, a lot of NHS trusts have decided to publish a statement. We've also had some instances where organisations who our research team have been working with and sort of applying for funding from have requested to see our modern slavery and human trafficking statement. And of course, it's sort of an ethical, transparent thing to do to set out the arrangements that we have in place to prevent slavery and human trafficking. So I have prepared a draft statement, and that has been produced with input from relevant colleagues because it covers several areas, so including HR, finance, procurement, safeguarding and freedom to speak up. And the format of the statement follows sort of the areas that are outlined in the legislation, so it follows sort of the format that I suggested. I've also reviewed it against the statements that have been published by other NHS trusts just to make sure we're in line with best practice. As you mentioned, Max, where we do have a statement, it has to be published on the website and there has to be sort of a link from the homepage. So it has to be sort of, easy to find. and it has to be approved by the board and signed by a director and then reviewed on an annual basis. So I'm asking the board to review and approve our draft statement, which is attached to Appendix 1 for publication on the website, and then we will review it on an annual basis going forward if approved.
Thank you very much, Laura. I think, may I call it an important people promise? We are committing here, are we not, to apply due diligence processes, both internally and externally, to slavery and human trafficking, and to review that on an annual basis. So it's a significant commitment we're making. Entirely appropriate, it seems to me, but I will, of course, pause and ask whether anybody wishes to inquire of any further detail or has any comments regarding it. If not, Laura, have you proposed a review process for this as to who might do that and how?
Well, it would be, as I've prepared it this time, I've prepared it with input from staff across the relevant teams, and then it's been reviewed through the executive team before bringing here for final sign-off. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, at the risk of giving everything to the Equality and Diversity Council, I do imagine they would wish to be cited on it. And for example, staff networks would be a great source of intelligence, wouldn't they, as to our commitment here. So, Mel, I can see you nodding there and quite comfortable with that.
Yeah, I can see there's all sorts of little connections it can be, but if it needs a home, I'm happy to do it there, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, certainly wasn't suggesting that, Mel. I'm happy that you'll decide along with Laura where that sits, but you can see the connections there, can't you? Staff networks would be a good source of intelligence, I would have thought. Colleagues, are we content to endorse and review and approve, indeed, this modern slavery and human trafficking statement, to place it on our website and to commit to the principles in it and to review it annually? I think we are, unanimously. Yeah, Laura, thank you very much indeed for that. That's extremely helpful. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, are we joined by Graham? Not sure if I can see Graham on the.
I don't think he's on at the moment. I know Sheridan has contacted him to ask if he can join a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Can't see him on the call at the moment.
Well, he'll have thought that would have wind up, won't it, with me in the chair? If that can't be right, are you sure? Let's go to item 24 then and turn to Saj for the premises assurance model. So let's deal with that first, and we'll come back to the data protection stuff with Graham in a moment.
Thank you.
So Saj, with you, and of course here we're being asked to, well, it's highlighted areas of it, confirming that reassessment of the PAM model for 2023. We wish to highlight areas of outstanding practice and provide a comparison of the year-on-year overall compliance level within each domain. But with you, Saj, to bring to our attention what you wish.
Thank you, Max. And before I start, I just wanted to check with Laura that I thought Chris Davies was going to come back. I'm happy to go through this, and we can probably stand Chris down. So yes, the paper highlights the fact that this is something that we're required to do and have been doing since April 2018, and that was on the back of the Director of NHS Estates and Facilities confirmed that this is a mandatory requirement. It's about assuring the board that our premises are safe, and it measures against 5 key domains: so safety, patient experience, efficiency, effectiveness, and organizational governance. At the time when we initially put forward our PAM audit and progress update, we undertook a third-party independent baseline review, so to ensure that we have an impartial view. And since then, in 2021, there's been an internal audit, high assurance review of this as well. The results are contained within the appendix and the detailed paper there, but we just wanted to bring to the board's attention the fact that we've been able to maintain an overall position of good, and then to highlight that this would be subject to sign off from board what is formally submitted through to NHS England as part of our 23 submission. So there's nothing else to add, Chair, unless there's any specific questions on this.
No, thank you very much. The way the paper reads, of course, emphasises the overall rating of good for each of the 5 domains. Is there anything, Saj, you would wish to bring to our attention in terms of challenges in those areas?
No, so we've managed to improve. I suppose the thing is, have we moved from good to outstanding in a number of areas? We have been able to, but we've not had sufficient improvement to shift the dial overall from good to outstanding. You can see in the graphs there the particular areas where we have been able to improve as well. So all of that's picked up within there, but there isn't anything else really from my perspective. But it wasn't just sufficient enough to move us to outstanding, but we've maintained an overall good rating. For those areas or for areas where we are still pushing forward on, there is an action plan that sits behind this paper that the Estates and Facilities team are working through at the moment. So again, nothing else to update on that.
That's fabulous, Saj. Thank you very much. Can we safely assume, do you think, that Chris Davies wouldn't have wished to bring to our attention anything here? You're right, it is on the front of the paper that he was hoping to be here for this bit, although we may be rocketing through a little bit now. So I'm sure we'll hear from Chris if there's anything we need to know. But otherwise, are we content to take Saj's briefing to us, please, and note the continued progress in reapplication of this mandatory premises assurance model and submission to NHS England. And what we'll do is we'll maybe just, Laura, maybe you'll be the person, if you don't mind, just to check with Chris that there was nothing else he wanted to bring to our attention, that we've been able to get to that item. It might be sensible to be able to endorse that. But at the moment, it looks like there's unanimous support for the recommendation that we're content to note that. We're not being asked to approve anything, but indeed to note it. But it's right that we question if we have anything. So we'll check with Chris, but thank you, Saj, for the briefing. We do note and we unanimously support the declaration. Thank you. Going on to item 25, I know I'm going to come back to 23. Let's do the use of the trust seal. So it's kind of a sort of an administrative reporting position, but I will turn to Laura and just ask if she wishes to bring our attention specifically to anything asking us to note the use of the trust seal. Laura.
Thank you. I mean, nothing in particular to note, Max. I think, like you say, it's a requirement to report sort of the use of the seal to the board, and we do that on an annual basis. But yeah, nothing in particular that I wanted to highlight.
So again, colleagues, in the spirit of doing things correctly and properly, of course, that's been the use of the trust seal, the 8 times it's referred to in the report. And are people content to note that? It would appear so. Thank you, everybody. Okay, well, let's nip back to 23 now then, please, for the annual Data Protection Officer Information Governance Report. We are being asked to receive and note the report and be satisfied that the roles have been effectively planned and discharged to provide the Board of Directors and Trust with the appropriate information and assurances regarding compliance with GDPR and the Data Protection Act. Okay, so Graham, I can see you are on the call, and thank you for that. And I think you are here representing Jenny. So should I turn to you first, Graham, please, and ask if there's anything you wish to bring directors' attention to in relation to this report at 23, please?
Hi. Yep. Hello, everybody. I just thought I'd just pull out a few little points of, I suppose, good news. So on the Data Security Protection Toolkit this year, we submitted as standards met, and the audit report gave a high level of assurance. And this year, for the first time since I joined the trust, we had no recommendations to follow up on, which was a good result, in my opinion. And just to note that for this year, there will be some changes because they've dropped the 95% target on mandatory training for information governance. They've changed that this year to basically say we have to ensure that we have an appropriate understanding of information governance and cybersecurity with no specific percentage target. So that's going to mean some more work for us in developing different training methods, but gives us more flexibility. So with a bit of luck, that'll improve things on like uptake, because we always struggle with the last minute on that part of the toolkit. So moving on from that, incidents this year, we have had a slight increase compared to the year before, but 18% and only minor, so no increase on reportable incidents. We had 2 reportables this year, but the ICO opinion confirmed that they didn't believe we had a systemic problem with any of our IGs thing. And generally that's a positive that there were only 2. So finally, just pick up a couple of things that we'll be looking at for the future. So for continued development, we're looking at further improving our data protection by design principles. So that'll be mapping processes, looking at data protection impact assessments, and there are some new templates that NHS England have developed for national use, not mandatory, but we'll be looking at those to see whether those help streamline across the patch if everyone starts using the same paperwork. We're also developing an IG service catalogue, which will eventually go on the internet so people know what we do and don't do within the IG team, which hopefully will save people going backwards and forwards and trying to find out who does what.
Yes.
Yeah, there are things I just wanted to point out. Is there anybody else want to ask me anything, or?
Yeah, Graham, that's extremely helpful. Thanks very much. That's a good pointer to the key issues. And Paul, I was certainly going to come to you anyway and ask if there was anything as executive lead you wish to add, but I'll come to you first then. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Max. And Graham, I'm apologising in advance for what might feel like a bouncer, given that you're here deputising for Jenny. But I guess if I think about the whole board discussion today, there are various external tragedies, I'll use the word, and in some cases sort of criminal events that we've had to reflect as a board. I would imagine the board will be equally aware of significant information breaches that affected organisations like the PSNI and the Electoral Commission. It was just whether there was anything else that you wanted to add to underscore that we are confident in our systems and our approach and the extent to which we're not, without being complacent, in any way likely to be exploited to the same level of vulnerability as those sorts of organisations have been.
Very fair question. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, Graham, your views?
I think from our point of view, we're going to be, if we're improving our training and delivery, and then I don't think there's any increased risk based on what Paul's talking about. I don't think we have had any level of incident which would, I think of the phrase, which would warrant severe concern about systems within the trust anyway.
Yeah.
That helpful?
Sorry, Graham, I was only going to ask you, I guess there's always a risk of individual wrongdoing, isn't there, with people with access to systems? I guess that's always a tough policing job.
Yeah, I mean, most of our incidents, practically all of them, are people either erroneously going into records or, let's say, being a bit nosy in certain records. So, again, that with training improvements, hopefully we can get that through. That people are a bit more aware. I mean, they should be anyway, because it is something that's discussed at induction and policies throughout the trust. But as you say, people make mistakes and people do things when they think, I'll just do this, I'll be fine. But I know there was a recent case, and she's just come through court, that the ICO took someone in a social work scenario to court and fined them, and they lost the jobs as well, just by looking at people's records when they shouldn't. So I think if we sort of put that out there a little more strongly, maybe we can reduce the number of people having a nosy.
Of course, yes. Well said, Graham. Yeah. No, I recognise the risk there. Extremely difficult to entirely stop, but maybe more easy perhaps to identify these days with some of the systems we have.
Yeah, we have better audit trails.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Graham. That's really helpful. And Graham, as chair, can I say it's great that there's a bit of flexibility with training, but I think even yourself, a couple of times you've mentioned the importance, haven't you, of training and recognition of information governance issues. So I do hope we can keep up with that superb, it seems to me, level of 96% in a. I assume that's all staff, is it?
Yeah, that's trust wide.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Super.
Yeah, I mean the new dropping of the 95% doesn't mean we're going to say, well, we don't have to do that. It just means we'll do it in a different way. We'll still be chasing up to get as high a number of people trained as possible.
Thank you. I think that's what I hope to hear, and I assumed that from your input, Graham. Thank you. Ray, please let me bring you in.
Thanks, Max. That actually is just answered my question. I was going to say that 96% is a great feat, and I know there's a battle every year to do that. It's great that we're given a little bit more leeway, but we still do have instances despite the 96%. And Graham, I'm glad you provided that reassurance that we're not going to see that as an opportunity not to take this seriously, because we've still got to strive for full.
It's certainly not a get out clause, right?
Yeah, no, that and of course we should speak like this, shouldn't we? It's important to us. So yeah, thank you, Ray. Yes, well said. And Altaf, please do come in.
Hi, thanks, Graham. I don't know where this exactly falls, whether it falls on Paul's shoulders or yours. I mean, a significant risk is going to be due to lost and stolen devices, and then secondly, bring your own devices. I mean, are we sufficiently kind of assured that under both those scenarios we've got sufficient protection in terms of especially with bring your own devices, where people don't have access to sensitive data away from their work context, or where they can actually breach data away from premises, and lost devices are sufficiently sure that people don't have access because of the endpoint management or containerization we have within those devices.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Graham, I didn't mean to interrupt you. And I know Paul probably wants to come in on this, but you do go first, please, Graham. Yeah.
All I was going to say is it's the device, the trust devices is less of an issue because they should all be encrypted anyway. Bring your own devices can be an issue, but I'm aware of several applications to get apps which are more secure to use on those devices rather than just using your device, for example, taking photographs in A&E and things like that. So there is awareness that we shouldn't be using our own bring your own device for clinical work without using secure apps to do that. But I think it's probably more an IT side that we would look at on that rather than just IG.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. Yeah, and Paul, was this on this point, perhaps?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I mean, Graham's done an able job there. I mean, in reality, there is a comprehensive mobile device management platform in place across the organisation that would allow us to make sure that subject to, and it's to nefarious behaviour. Again, it was interesting Graham alluded to things like cameras on phones. I mean, phones have got so much functionality these days that clearly if someone decided nefariously to take photographs in certain circumstances, or that's a much bigger challenge. But in terms of trying to ensuring that the digital estate under our control is as tightly managed as practically possible, we do. I would say on the flip side, one of the things that I've challenged the team to think about actually is the benefits potentially of a BYOD or bring your own device strategy going forward. We haven't particularly explored that in the past because, as colleagues know, we needed to make a step change in our investment in the digital infrastructure and the edge and the Wi-Fi estate. Once that's in place, actually you can have potentially an active and mature conversation with people about the value of running their whole lives off one device, again, subject to all of those appropriate controls being in place. And it's also very probably a step towards having a different dialogue with our patients and broader families and service users about how their role and their relationship with their devices can be part of a whole different conversation about self-management, education, routing through the hospital, a whole plethora of things that are a wee bit antediluvian and a bit paper-based at the moment. But so it's a sort of watch this space answer, Max, but be assured that we won't do anything that would ultimately compromise the integrity of sensitive information in the trust.
Great stuff, Paul. Thank you. And an entirely appropriate question, Altaf. Thank you for raising that. Challenging areas, and very well put, Graham and Paul. Thank you. Fahim, did you want to add to this, please?
Yeah, just to say, Max, I think that compliance rate of 96% just shows the sort of level of seriousness that we take data security at. And you'll remember, well, you may remember the Morrison's data breach case, which was an employee who decided to effectively leak the payroll data of the employees of Morrison's. And I think it's really important from an organisation's perspective that we keep that focus on training that Graham's highlighted. And also that actually from a data breach perspective, as an organisation, we are required to make sure we've got all of those types of processes in place in the event that something does happen that's completely outwith of our control, that we can at least be assured that we've done everything reasonable that we would expect to do. So the point around actually data breaches, etc., I think we do everything we possibly can normally, but when we do get those cases where there are data breaches, we deal with those as serious matters. Graham's highlighted before when we get those types of issues. So we do take those seriously, and we do actually make sure that we look into each and every single one.
That's extremely helpful, Fahim. Thank you very much. I can see that there appears to be unanimous support for the idea that actually this is an area where we do want to keep up training levels. Because it's about knowledge, and it's a message, isn't it? It's a message, a culture message, actually, from us. Karen, you've put it very well there yourself with the comment in chat, the cyber indicate data security culture. And that's helped by everybody getting through that training and thinking about it, isn't it? The input. Karen, did you want to make a comment, please?
Yeah, just to endorse what you've just said, actually, Max, it is a cultural thing. And I think we had this discussion in a board session recently when we were talking about learning and other, the statistics around getting people to do some of the mandatory kind of learning. And when you make it about keeping BTHFT safe, it's a different kind of education, because people understand the why, and the why of this is really, really important. So yeah, absolutely, it's a cultural point.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. And that's good to hear from Chair of the People Academy, of course, as well, Karen. So thank you for that. Yeah. And Saj, please do come in.
Yeah, just reflecting, I was on an interview panel earlier this week where we were recruiting consultants, and information governance, along with equality, diversity and inclusion, obviously being key mandatory questions. So it starts from the point that we recruit people into our organisation, set out our expectations, not only about the legislation, but as Karen's pointed out nicely there, it's about the why as well. So we do ask that question of why is it important, and what does this mean to you, and what would you do if there was an information governance breach? How would you minimize it? So I think what we've got here is a real practical example of how not only is something policy, but how we actually apply and ensure compliance as well.
Well said, Sash. Thank you for that. Yes, yeah. And Paul, please do come in.
Yeah, so Max, my final comment was actually to loop right back to a line item that was in Mel's update earlier on, which was the secure data environment and the success of a bid led by Bradford on behalf of the whole of the region. And the only reason I'm making that link is that clearly IG and people having confidence in the way in which we manage and appropriately use their data has huge implications for direct care and for their preparedness to come forward and share candidly with us. It's got huge implications for everything we've talked about the representation of people with disability in our workforce, being prepared to identify and declare that. It's got huge ramifications for FTSE. You know, it's a, I hate the phrase, but it's a golden thread through an awful lot of the topics that we've discussed. But also ultimately, if we're going to get to a place where people are confident in the way we use their data for research, then that's also a part of the compact. So as I say, I think there's lots of reasons why we want to get this right for direct care, for the confidence of our colleagues, and for our communities when it comes to opportunities more widely to consent to participate in you know, globally relevant research.
Yeah, well said, Paul. Well said. So Graham, you've heard from directors, and you've got the most senior people in the organisation sitting around the virtual table here. We respect the work you're doing, and we thank you for that. We note that the impact on culture and confidence, so a couple of C's there that we see in this work. And can you also take a third C from us, which is a commendation? We commend you and your team for achieving 96% training. We promise as directors not to be finger pointing into, you know, with the dropping of the target, but what we collectively believe is that high levels of training in information governance is crucial to the way we move forward. So we commend you for what you've done, and actually we say, if you can, we try and keep it up. We will support you in doing that.
Yep, that's the intention, Max, and thanks for everyone for the supportive comments.
Great stuff, Graham. No, terrific. Good briefing. Thank you for being here, and thank you for what you're doing. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, Graham.
Bye-bye.
All the best. Thank you. Colleagues, thanks for your comments there, and Paul particularly as exec lead there. That was great, and actually a very nice, reasonable challenge at the start as well. So that's good stuff. Good questions and comments. Thank you. There being no other business, I'll just check that no further hands are raised. I think we've come to the end of our open Board of Directors meeting. We are still, of course, recording and publishing this. Can I thank those colleagues who take the time to produce the documents at the 3 annexes? They are hugely important. So the reports in there, and of course the Academy minutes that are in there. Hugely important and not forgotten. Just because we don't go to them as specific agenda items, they support everything we're talking about. So my sincere thanks to those that have the job of pulling those together. They're extremely useful and important. We've come to the end of the Board of Directors meeting. I don't think there's any further items to consider. Can I suggest that if there's anything that has arisen, we've picked it up in terms of any referrals to board committees, academies, etc. And of course, we meet again in November. Colleagues, shall we close this meeting and move directly and straight away to the closed board meeting? Would you be comfortable with doing that?